Money and war have gone hand in hand ever since the first chieftain hired a neighbor to guard the borders. Today, we'll take a look into the wallets of warriors whose names thundered thousands of years ago. We'll try to understand in which era the profession of a soldier was truly the most profitable. Let's start with ancient Egypt, where professional warriors were paid not in gold, but in grain and plots of land. An ordinary infantryman during the era of Ramses II received a standard ration, which was enough to feed a family of 5. Nothing extraordinary. However, a true financial revolution in the army occurred in ancient Rome. In the 1st century AD, a legionary received a fixed salary of 225 denarii per year, divided into 3 installments. Let's imagine what that meant in practice. 1 denarius equaled 4 sestertii, and 1 sestertius could buy 2 liters of inexpensive wine. Yet, a legionary almost never saw the full amount in hand. The Roman bureaucracy deducted money for food. Separate deductions were made for replacing worn-out tunics and repairing colleague sandals. Even cleaning weapons and replacing a broken pilum had to be paid for out of their own pockets. In the end, a legionary was left with about 80 denarii net for entertainment and gambling. But the Roman had an ace up his sleeve, the donativum. These were one-time payments from a new emperor upon ascending the throne, which could equal an entire year's salary. And after 20 years of service, the mission accomplished awaited the soldier, missio honesta. He was paid 3,000 denarii or given a plot of land in a colony. Essentially, this made him wealthier than 90% of the empire's population. To compare this with modern times, a legionary's pension was equivalent to the cost of a high-quality country house. The Romans were the first to realize a well-fed soldier, confident in his future, is the key to stable borders. Turning to Greek hoplites, they were more like property-owning militiamen. In Athens, during campaigns, they were paid 1 drachma per day. This was enough to buy food for themselves and 1 servant armor-bearer. However, the hoplite bought his own armor, which cost as much as a small herd of cows. Therefore, Greek warfare was a middle-class affair. In Sparta, on the other hand, no money was paid at all, as it was considered beneath a warrior. Spartans lived off the labor of helots who worked their land. Thus, their salary was free time for training. In general, the ancient warrior was either a state employee or a wealthy landowner. The risk of death was compensated by high social status. But with the fall of Rome, this orderly financial system collapsed. The Dark Ages arrived, where pay became a matter of personal loyalty. A chieftain fed his retinue at feasts and gifted them rings of precious metals. This was an economy of gifts, not market relations. The concept of salary vanished from the military lexicon for several centuries.
By the 14th century, war had once again become professional and very expensive. Look at the English archer during the Battle of Agincourt. He received 6 pence a day, which was 2 to 3 times higher than the wage of an ordinary plowman. A professional archer could afford good meat and high-quality cloth. But the real money circulated in the upper class, among the knighthood. A knight banneret received 4 shillings a day, 8 times more than an archer. But don't be too quick to envy his income. A single warhorse, a destrier, cost between 10 and 50 pounds sterling. To give you a sense of scale, 50 pounds was the annual income of an entire village. Furthermore, a knight was obligated to bring a squad of squires and infantry with him. He immediately distributed most of his pay to his subordinates. The real business for a knight was capturing prisoners. The ransom for a noble gentleman could amount to thousands of gold marks. It was a lottery. You could either become a millionaire in one battle or die in debt. In the 15th century, the Landsknechts, German mercenaries, entered the stage. They were called the Dogs of War, and they knew their worth. A rank-and-file Landsknecht received 4 guilders a month. With this money, one could buy 150 liters of beer or 20 kilograms of beef. Landsknechts spent almost all their money on extravagant clothing. They were officially permitted to break sumptuary laws because their lives were short. No pensions or social benefits existed in mercenary units. Often, captains delayed payments for months, leading to famous empty wallet mutinies. When there was no money, the soldiers simply looted the local population. Pillaging was an unofficial but mandatory part of the benefits package of that time. In the Age of Discovery, sailor soldiers appeared. On Spanish galleons, a sailor received a fixed wage but dreamed of a share of the cargo. However, most of them died of scurvy before they ever saw ink and gold. Let's move to the Ottoman Empire and the famous Janissaries. Early in their history, they received a daily wage, ulufe, but their main value was the cauldron, the symbol of their unit. The state fed them completely, from rice to oil. By the 17th century, the janissaries had become so influential that they essentially set their own salaries by blackmailing the sultan. This is an example of an army turning into a labor union. If the sultan tried to reduce payments, the janissaries would overturn their cauldrons in protest. Compare this with the income of a Japanese samurai. A samurai received income in koku, the amount of rice needed to feed one person for a year. A low-ranking samurai might receive between 50 and 100 koku. He sold part of the rice at the market to buy weapons and kimonos. But in peacetime, samurai often fell into poverty as the price of rice dropped. Many of them went into debt to the merchants they despised. Thus, even in the Middle Ages, the military budget depended on market fluctuations.
The 18th century brought regular armies and rigid discipline. A British redcoat received 1 shilling a day, but from this shilling, 6 pence were deducted for food and 2 pence for equipment. The remainder was called the beer penny. The life of a soldier at this time was extremely difficult. In Prussia, under Frederick the Great, the situation was even harsher. A Prussian soldier received just enough so as not to starve to death. It was believed that a soldier should fear his corporal more than the enemy. However, it was during this time that the system of officer commissions was born. To become an officer in England, one had to purchase the rank. A captain's commission cost thousands of pounds. This was an investment. The officer received a salary and a percentage of the regiment's budget. In Russia, under Peter I, a soldier received 10 rubles a year. For this money, one could buy 2 cows, which was not bad for a peasant. But service was for life, in later 25 years. It wasn't just a job, but a total severance from one's family. During the Napoleonic era, the French army lived by the principle, war must feed war. Napoleon paid little, but he allowed his soldiers to take everything they could carry. The soldiers of the Grande Armée were the most motivated, despite empty pockets. They knew that for bravery, they could receive the Legion of Honor, which came with a lifetime annuity. Essentially, Napoleon implemented a KPI system in military affairs. If you are a hero, you are wealthy and respected. If you are just part of the gray mass, be content with stale bread. In the mid-19th century, during the Crimean War, the situation began to change. Public opinion forced governments to improve supplies. The first field kitchens and organized medical care appeared. A soldier's salary became more protected from the whims of commanders. Look at the American Civil War. A Union private received $13 a month. Confederates received $11, but due to hyperinflation, this money was worthless by the end of the war. With 1 month's pay, a Confederate soldier couldn't even buy a pair of boots. This is a clear example of how economics kills an army faster than bullets. By the end of the 19th century, the professional soldier began to resemble a civil servant. He had leave, the right to free postage, and state insurance. The purchasing power of wages grew thanks to the Industrial Revolution. Food became cheaper, meaning more money stayed in their hands. At the same time, colonial troops in India or Africa received climate bonuses. A British officer in India lived like a true lord on his salary. He might have 10 servants for 1 person. This was a golden age for those serving in the colonies. However, the risk of dying from a fever was higher than from a rebel's bullet.
Let's do the final calculation. Who was the wealthiest warrior in history? If we measure by net income, it was a lucky pirate or a knight with a wealthy prisoner. If we measure by stability and a secured future, it was the Roman legionary during the height of the empire. I am always happy to hear your opinion in the comments. And with that, I am finished. Thank you for your attention.